You know, people often call King Lear one of the greatest plays ever written, but what if I told you its real genius isn't in the story itself, but in how Shakespeare took the original, happy version and completely shattered it? Let's dive in.
For centuries, this play has been hailed as this towering achievement in literature. The famous poet Shelley called it the most perfect drama in existence, and honestly, when you really get into it, it is so hard to argue with him.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the core plot, it was ancient. Shakespeare's audience already knew the story, and they knew exactly how it was supposed to end. And, spoiler alert, it was not supposed to be a tragedy.
So to really get what Shakespeare did, we have to start by looking at the original blueprint for the story, the version that pretty much everyone in the 17th century would have already known by heart.
What's so wild is that the story of King Lear wasn't new at all. It had been told and retold for almost 500 years before Shakespeare even put pen to paper. It was a huge part of British folklore, showing up in history books, epic poems, and even another play that was on stage right before Shakespeare wrote his version.
And this is the most crucial part. The original story was a story of justice. It was this, reassuring fable where good triumphs over evil, and the rightful king is put back on his throne. The good daughter, Cordelia, she saves the day, and everything works out just fine in the end. It's a classic happily ever after. Okay, so Shakespeare sees this familiar, happy story and decides to just burn it to the ground. He keeps the setup, sure, but he completely throws out the ending.
This was probably Shakespeare's most radical move. He takes a story that everyone knows is supposed to end in triumph and rewrites it as one of the bleakest, most devastating tragedies you can imagine. He kills Cordelia. He has Lear literally die of a broken heart. He demolishes the happy ending his audience was expecting, forcing them to look at a world where justice doesn't always win. But he didn't just flip the ending. No, he deepened the entire world of the play with these unforgettable new elements. He adds the fool, whose commentary adds this layer of dark humor and wisdom. He creates that iconic storm scene, where Lear's inner madness is perfectly mirrored by the chaos of nature. And, maybe most importantly, he adds a whole second family tragedy into the mix.
Right, so the Gloucester story acts like this dark mirror to Lear's. It shows another family being torn apart by lies and ambition, which makes the main tragedy feel so much more universal. Gloucester is literally blinded, right? Just as Lear is metaphorically blind to the truth about his daughters. This parallel structure just makes the play's themes hit with this terrifying power.
So the big question is, when did this huge transformation actually happen? Well, we can look at the timeline.
Turns out, the play was a product of a very specific moment in time. We can actually see Shakespeare borrowing language for his characters from a book that was just published. And he probably studied the printed version of the old happy ending play right before deciding to just shatter its conventions.
And the play didn't just pull from books. It also reflected the very real anxieties and events of its time.
Okay, get this. Just a couple of years before the play was written, London was obsessed with this real-life family drama that was shockingly similar to the plot of Lear. You had an elderly father, 3 daughters, a big fight over the inheritance, and a heroic youngest daughter named, wait for it, Cordell. It's an incredible coincidence that would have made the play's family drama feel intensely real to the audience.
And all this meant that the themes of a divided kingdom and the nature of power would have felt incredibly relevant. King James I was busy trying to unite Britain, so Lear's act of carving up his kingdom would have seemed like a total political catastrophe. The play's questions about who has the right to rule and the dangers of surrounding yourself with yes-men, well, those were direct reflections of the politics of the day.
And because of all this richness, all this context, the work is so incredibly complex that it has inspired countless interpretations over the centuries. You can look at it through so many different lenses.
So for example, some scholars have read the play not just as a family drama, but as this powerful religious allegory.
So in this particular view, and remember, it's just one of many interpretations, the play tells a kind of origin story for the divine right of Christian monarchs, which was a concept central to King James's rule. Lear, who represents the old order, is blinded by his pride and rejects the Christ-like Cordelia, and that act leads to the total destruction of his family line, letting power get transferred to a new, untarnished lineage, basically legitimizing the Christian monarchy. It's a fascinating way to view the play's political and spiritual sides.
So what does all of this tell us?
Why, after 400 years, do we still call this borrowed story an absolute masterpiece?
Well, the answer is simple, but it's also really profound. The genius isn't in the plot, he borrowed that. It's in the profound and totally fearless transformation of that plot into something more challenging and maybe more true.
Shakespeare's genius was taking this simple piece of folklore and turning it into one of the most powerful and enduring questions about humanity ever put on a stage. He forced his audience to look straight into the abyss, to question the very nature of justice, of loyalty, and of sanity itself.
And that transformation, that's why 400 years later, we can come back to that quote from Shelley and understand exactly what he meant. The play isn't perfect because it's some neat story with a tidy moral. It's perfect because it's messy, and it's brutal, and it's an honest reflection of our world.
And that, maybe, is the ultimate sign of its genius. It doesn't just give us a story. It leaves us thinking, long after the curtain falls. It asks us what we owe our families, what justice even looks like in a chaotic world, and how in the world we find meaning when we're faced with unbearable suffering. And those are questions that never, ever get old.